At the family reunion I paid for, they handed me a t-shirt that said "Biggest Disappointment." Everyone laughed. I didn't. I simply smiled, stood up and walked away. Upstairs, I opened a velvet folder. Inside were college tuitions, retirement gifts, debt forgiveness and second chances. I had planned a surprise that would change their lives. But now I was done. I walked back down, ripped every page in silence, left the pieces on my plate and said, "Enjoy the shirts." They didn't get it then, but they would, because this time I wasn't asking to be seen. I was making sure they'd never forget me. The sun was just beginning to set over the lake when Emily Clark stood by the porch watching her family filter in one by one. The place looked exactly how she remembered it as a child. Same creaky wooden floorboards, same porch swing swaying gently in the breeze. But it wasn't nostalgia that filled her chest now. It was anxiety. She had planned everything down to the smallest detail. The catered food, the lakeside activities, the matching t-shirts folded neatly in gift bags waiting on each chair. She wanted it to be perfect. It had been 12 years since the last family gathering. Back then she could barely afford the gas to get there, and they'd made sure she felt that. But this time she had paid for it all, every last dollar. Not just to show them she could, but to finally feel like she belonged. As everyone settled in for dinner, the gift bags were handed out, laughter rippling through the room as each family member held up their t-shirt. "Grillmaster," her dads said. "Queen Bee" for her mum. "The Wild One" for her younger brother Jacob. "Social Butterfly" for her sister Kate. Emily opened hers last. "Biggest Disappointment." There was a pause, just long enough for her to register the words, the bold black letters stretching across her shirt like a scar. Then came the laughter, loud, genuine, unfiltered. Jacob clapped the table. "Come on, it's just a joke," Kate chimed in, snorting. "You've got to admit it's kind of funny." Emily's smile was automatic, practiced. Her eyes scanned the table. Her mum offered a polite laugh, clearly uncomfortable, while her dad shook his head with that familiar smirk that said, "Well, that's what happens when you're the odd one out." Her hands clenched beneath the tablecloth. She didn't argue, didn't flinch. She simply folded the shirt with delicate care and set it aside like it was made of glass. But inside she was 9 years old again. She was back in the kitchen, standing beside a broken cookie jar. Jacob had knocked it over, but somehow she was the one who got grounded. She was 12, failing one math test, and hearing her mum sigh loud enough for the whole house to feel it. 15, begging for someone to attend her science fair, only for no one to show because Jacob had baseball. 18, graduating without honours, but with a small scholarship no one acknowledged. Her whole life, disappointment had followed her like a label stitched into her skin. And now it was on a t-shirt. She glanced at the faces around the table, so sure of themselves, so secure in their places within the family. The golden child, the funny one, the rock, the matriarch. And her? She was the one who never quite fit, the one whose successes were ignored and whose failures were magnified. Emily had spent years building something for herself, quietly, relentlessly. She had launched a tech company from her apartment's kitchen table, pulled all-nighters for years, reinvested every cent she made, and now that company employed dozens, maybe hundreds soon. She had every right to feel proud. But in this room, around this table, all of that was invisible. What they saw wasn't her success. It was who she used to be, who they wanted her to stay. She smiled again, this time so calmly it scared even her. "Excuse me," she said, rising from her chair. Nobody stopped her. She walked upstairs to her guest room. Technically, it was her room. She had rented the entire estate. As she closed the door behind her, she leaned against it for a moment and let herself breathe. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her thoughts were clearer than they had ever been. They thought this was funny, they thought it was harmless, but they were about to find out just how much she remembered, and just how far she'd come. Emily stood by the window of her room, the hum of distant conversation from downstairs, muffled by the thick wooden walls. The laughter still echoed in her head. She pressed her fingers against her temples as if she could squeeze it out. That shirt, her shirt, had been made using her money. Her credit card had covered the printing, the catering, the venue, the transportation. Every detail of this reunion had been paid for by her, and they used it to mock her. Not just mock, diminish, undercut. Remind her that no matter what she built or how far she came, she would always be their disappointment. The irony burned deeper than any insult. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a notification from the catering service confirming tomorrow's brunch. Another from the transportation company double-checking airport rides. She had arranged it all, wanting the weekend to be seamless, memorable. She turned off the phone. Across the room, her suitcase lay open. At the bottom, beneath a change of clothes and some extra chargers, sat a navy blue folder. She reached for it, pulled it out, and placed it on the desk. Her fingers lingered on the textured surface. It was heavier than it looked, filled with the kind of documents most families dream about, but none of them deserved what was inside. Her jaw clenched. 17. She was 17 again, standing in the living room with a FAFSA form in hand. A partial scholarship had come through, but she needed a small loan to cover the rest. "I just need a signature," she had pleaded. Her father hadn't even looked at her. "You need to learn responsibility," he'd said. Her mother had agreed, sipping tea like the decision was already made. Meanwhile, that same year, Kate got approved for a photography program in Europe. Flights, tuition, housing, all covered. Jacob? He had crashed 2 cars by then. Still got a third, with a bow on top. Emily had picked up shifts at a diner, then a gas station. Then both? 4 hours of sleep a night, studying between shifts, building something out of pure grit. She never asked them again. Not for a signature, not for help. Now she sat here, 25 years later, having built a life so solid it could have become theirs too, if they had only seen her, believed in her, treated her like she mattered. But instead they gave her a T-shirt. She laughed dry and quiet, not from humour, but from the absurdity of it all. They had used her money to fund her humiliation. She stood, folder in hand, and walked to the mirror, looked at herself. Not the scared girl they once ignored, not the silent sibling who always stayed behind, but a woman who had rebuilt herself alone. "Enough," she whispered. She didn't slam the folder down, didn't scream, didn't cry. Instead, she opened it slowly, scanned each document. College fund transfers for Kate's kids, an early retirement plan for her parents, a debt relief letter for Jacob, even a job referral draft if he ever wanted to start fresh. Every sheet typed, signed, notarized. She had printed them on high-grade parchment, made them feel like gifts. But now they felt like betrayal. Not theirs, hers, for trying again, for thinking this time would be different. Downstairs, a new wave of laughter erupted. The sound stabbed deeper now. She closed the folder. Her hands were steady, her heartbeat slow. She knew what needed to happen next. No more explanations, no dramatic speeches, just one final act, one they'd never see coming. Emily moved with the kind of calm that only comes after the storm. After the moment your heart finally accepts that something is truly broken. She set the navy blue folder on the desk and opened it once more, her fingers brushing lightly over the top page like she was saying goodbye. The papers inside weren't just contracts, they were promises. Carefully written, meticulously structured promises. At the top was the college tuition transfer confirmation for Kate's twins, set to kick in next semester. Prepaid for 4 years at the private school Kate claimed she couldn't afford. Emily had opened a trust in their names, hidden under a neutral LLC. Kate would never have known where it came from. Only that, one day, the future suddenly seemed easier. Next came the mortgage payoff documents for her parents' house. It was months behind. She had called the bank anonymously, negotiated terms, transferred funds using a temporary holding company. All it needed was one final signature from the recipients. Jacob's folder came last. It held a debt forgiveness letter from a private collector and an employment referral, a chance to start over at one of her satellite offices out west. No handouts, just a door, quietly opened. These weren't just gestures. They were redemption arcs, second chances, safety nets that none of them even knew they needed, until now. Emily had imagined it all. She had seen her mother's hands tremble as she opened the folder, tears filling her eyes. Her father silent for once, unable to hide his awe. Kate whispering, "I'm sorry," across the table. Jacob standing, crossing the room to finally hug her like a brother should. She had imagined gratitude, reconciliation, a moment where years of silence and sarcasm melted into something warm and whole. Instead, what she got was a cotton blend punchline. Biggest disappointment. She gathered the documents slowly, page by page, slid them back into the folder. Her movements were precise, methodical, like a surgeon closing a wound. She zipped the folder shut and tucked it under her arm. Then she left the room. The hallway was quiet, the sounds from the dining area growing louder with each step, glasses clinking, someone telling a story about a vacation gone wrong. Laughter. Always laughter. She reached the landing and paused. From where she stood, she could see them. The entire table was glowing under the dim chandelier, a mosaic of matching shirts and wine-stained napkins. Her seat sat empty, her untouched plate now cleared away by someone who assumed she wasn't coming back. No one noticed her at the top of the stairs. Not one head turned, not even for a second. She took a breath and descended. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from hesitation, but from resolve. She wasn't here to plead or explain. She was here to finish what she started. Just not in the way she once planned. When she reached the bottom, she lingered near the hallway's edge. The folder pressed against her ribs like armour. They still hadn't noticed her. It struck her, in that moment, how easy it had always been for them not to see her, to overlook, to dismiss, to laugh at the label while ignoring the person underneath. She walked into the room. Not a grand entrance, just a soft step forward. Kate noticed first. "Hey, there she is," she said, lifting a glass. "Thought we lost you." Jacob turned, mouth half full. "You okay? You looked—" Emily gave them a smile. Not cold, not bitter, just final. "I'm fine," she said, and she placed the folder gently on her dinner plate. Emily remained silent as she stood behind her chair, her hands resting gently on the navy blue folder she had just placed on her dinner plate. The conversation around the table continued, barely acknowledging her presence. It was as though her absence had been more noticeable than her return. She undid the zipper slowly, deliberately, the subtle rasp of fabric opening, slicing through the din of laughter and forks scraping plates. Still no one turned. She flipped open the folder and reached inside. One by one she pulled out each document. The college trust for Kate's twins, the mortgage payoff for their parents, the debt forgiveness and job opportunity for Jacob. She held the first page up for a moment, just long enough for the paper to catch the light, then tore it cleanly in half. The sound was sharp, unmistakable. Kate glanced over, confused. "What are you doing?" Emily didn't respond. She picked up the next sheet and repeated the action, this time slower, each rip slicing through more than just paper. It cut through the illusion, the performance, the version of family they all clung to like it was sacred. Jacob leaned forward. "Emily, seriously, what the hell?" Still no answer. She tore the third page, then the fourth, then the fifth. Each time the pieces fluttered down onto the table like leaves falling in slow motion. Her mother's fork paused mid-air. Her father frowned, his lips parting to say something, but never quite getting there. Kate stood halfway. "Is that a contract? Why are you—" Emily looked up at her for the first time. Calm, measured. "You'll figure it out," she said softly. Then she picked up the last few pages, stacked them neatly, and shredded them together in one final deliberate motion. The silence was suffocating. The pile of torn parchment sat in the centre of the table like a crime scene. No one moved. No one dared to touch it. Emily closed the empty folder and laid it on top of the mess and stepped back from her chair. She looked around the table, not with anger, not with sadness, with clarity. "Enjoy the shirts," she said. And then she turned. She didn't storm out. She didn't slam a door or make a scene. She walked slowly, almost gracefully, past the wine glasses and salad bowls, past the stunned faces frozen in a tableau of shock. As she reached the door, she felt it, eyes on her back. Jacob. He was staring, his mouth slightly open, the colour draining from his face. For the first time he looked like he was starting to understand. But he didn't say anything. No one did. Emily opened the front door. The cool evening air rushed in, wrapping around her like a promise. She stepped out onto the porch, the wooden boards creaking beneath her shoes. Behind her, nothing. Not a footstep, not a word, not a single voice calling her back. And that, more than anything, told her she'd made the right choice. She descended the porch steps slowly, letting each breath out like she was releasing years. The grass was damp beneath her heels, the sky above just beginning to collect stars. It should have felt like a tragedy, but it didn't. It felt like a beginning. Her car waited at the edge of the long gravel driveway, engine cool, passenger seat empty. She opened the driver's side, slid in and closed the door. Her hands rested on the steering wheel for a long moment, not trembling, just still. She wasn't angry, she wasn't sad, she was done. And this time they would remember her. Not as their disappointment, but as the silence that followed after truth finally spoke. The tyres crunched softly over the gravel as Emily pulled away from the house. Her headlights lit the winding road ahead, framed by pine trees and shadows. Behind her, the house faded into darkness, swallowed by silence and distance. The navy blue folder sat beside her on the passenger seat, empty, folded neatly, like a ritual completed. She kept her eyes forward, hands steady on the wheel, but her thoughts drifted backward like ghosts in the rearview mirror. There had been so many quiet deposits, the extra payments towards her parents' mortgage when they fell behind, never acknowledged, always anonymous. She remembered calling the bank under a false name, setting up a temporary payment route, then watching her mother's Facebook post a week later about how a kind angel must be watching over us. That angel had a name, but no one ever asked. She had wired money to Kate after seeing her cryptic social media posts about stress and expenses. No questions asked, no strings attached. Just small transfers disguised as refunds, rebates, unexpected credits from places Kate wouldn't trace. She didn't want recognition, just peace. Even Jacob, as much as he mocked her, as much as he played the role of the golden son, she had helped him too. A private debt collector had threatened him last winter. Emily had negotiated a reduced settlement under a company shell and paid it discreetly. She never said a word, because she thought maybe if she gave enough, did enough, was generous enough, they'd finally see her. Not as the screw-up, not as the one who never fit, but as someone worthy of love, someone worth keeping. She thought kindness would earn her belonging. She thought loyalty would buy her family. Her fingers tightened on the steering wheel. How foolish she had been, how deeply, tragically naive. The reunion had shattered that illusion like a glass dropped on concrete. And it wasn't just the T-shirt, it was the way they laughed. The way no one stopped to say, "That's not fair." The way her mother giggled nervously, her father shrugged, her siblings smirked. They had taken her money, her planning, her generosity, and weaponized it into a joke. Biggest disappointment. And they thought it was hilarious. A lump rose in her throat, not from grief, but from the strange, surreal clarity that was settling in. They had always seen her that way. This wasn't new. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was who they believed she was. She slowed the car at a stop sign, the blinking red lights glowing in the still night. For a moment she didn't move, just sat there, hands resting at 10 and 2, eyes staring out into the quiet. She thought about her childhood, the skipped recitals, the one-sided punishments, the way Jacob could crash a car and be forgiven, while she got grounded for staying out 5 minutes past curfew. She thought about the scholarships no one celebrated, the company launch no one acknowledged, the viral success she never mentioned because she knew that they wouldn't care, or worse, they'd claim credit for it. She had been invisible for so long she started to believe she liked it that way, but she didn't, not really. She had hoped desperately that this reunion would be her bridge back, a way to finally stitch herself into the family fabric in a way that wasn't stained by sarcasm or silence. She thought they'd see her. She thought they'd say, "We were wrong about you." Instead, they printed it on a shirt. Emily exhaled slowly, and then for the first time in what felt like years, she smiled, not out of joy, but because the illusion was finally dead. She pressed the gas pedal gently and turned back onto the main road, heading away from the lake, away from the house, away from the people who would never choose to understand her. She didn't know where the road would lead, but she knew one thing for certain: she was never going back. The road unwound before her like ribbon, quiet and endless, lit only by headlights and moonlight. Emily didn't turn on the radio. She liked the silence. It felt honest, finally, after years of forced cheer and unspoken rules. She drove with the kind of ease that comes not from comfort, but from certainty. There was nothing left to question. At a gas station a few miles from town, she pulled over, not for fuel, but for Wi-Fi. She parked near the edge of the lot, flipped open her laptop on the passenger seat and tethered her phone. The connection blinked to life. Her inbox was already humming. She scanned through them, quickly, automated updates, promotional emails, but one stood out. It was from her attorney. The subject line read, "Prepared files confirmed." Emily opened it. Inside were scanned copies of every document she had destroyed earlier that night. Each page time-stamped, signed, and backed up in secure cloud folders. Another link showed the bank transaction history, anonymised to protect identities, but clear enough for those who knew where to look. She typed a short reply, "Please forward to Nicole and BCC me." Nicole was her assistant, efficient, unshakable, loyal. If the world was about to hear her story, Nicole would be the one pressing send. But Emily wasn't finished. She opened a draft she had saved weeks ago, a message with attachments already loaded, addressed to a Forbes senior editor. The subject, founder interview story, pitch final draft. Her fingers hovered for a second, just long enough to feel the weight of what she was about to do. Then she hit send. For years she had stayed silent. She had let them define her, let them spin the narrative. Emily, the dropout. Emily, the awkward one. Emily, always on the outside looking in. And even when she succeeded, even when she built something real and powerful, she had still downplayed it, afraid of making them uncomfortable, of seeming like she was bragging. But not tonight. Tonight, the silence ended. She leaned back in the seat, closed the laptop, and stared out into the darkness. The quiet buzz of the car's engine and the distant hum of the highway were the only sounds. Her mind wandered back to the interview itself, recorded weeks ago in a sunlit office with glass walls and soft leather chairs. The reporter had been curious, empathetic. "Tell me about the moment you knew your company had made it," he asked. She had smiled, not because she had an answer, but because she didn't. There was no one moment. There were 1,000. Staying up all night coding a broken feature, pitching to investors who didn't believe in her, seeing the first user subscription go through at 2:47 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday, signing her first payroll check. But the moment she truly felt proud, she hadn't told the reporter this part. It was the day she realised her company wasn't just profitable, it was sustainable. It could run without her for weeks, maybe months. She had built something that gave people jobs, gave them chances, gave them a future. Something stable, something real, something her family never gave her. And now, for the first time, the world would hear that story, not their version, not the one where she was too sensitive, too dramatic, too different, but the truth. She picked up her phone again and typed a message to Nicole. "Once the article goes live, you know what to do." Nicole's reply came instantly. "Already queued. Forbes drops tomorrow at 9 a.m. EST. Emily let the phone fall into her lap. She closed her eyes and let herself feel it. Not the anger, not the regret, but the quiet thrill of liberation. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't begging to be seen. She was shining a light so bright they'd have no choice but to squint. Tomorrow they'd see her name, her face, her company's valuation, the receipts. Tomorrow they'd realise the daughter-sister disappointment they laughed at was the foundation beneath all of them. The morning after the reunion, Emily woke early. The sun hadn't yet broken the horizon, but her phone was already buzzing. Not just one notification, dozens. Her screen lit up with missed calls, text messages, Instagram tags, even LinkedIn pings. She blinked at the flood of alerts, a strange chill running down her spine. Something had happened. And then she saw it. A photo posted on Laura's public Facebook page. It showed the long wooden table from the night before, plates still half full, the torn pieces of parchment barely visible under the soft candlelight. Everyone was in their matching shirts, smiling, glasses raised. The caption read, "Some people just can't handle being part of a family. We still love you even when you self-sabotage." No name, no tags. But it didn't matter. Everyone knew exactly who she meant. The comments were already rolling in. "So sorry you had to deal with that. Family can be tough. Sending hugs, girl. You're so strong." Well, sounds like she needs help, honestly. You did your best. Sometimes people just can't be saved. Emily stared at the screen, her jaw tight. The gaslighting was so casual, so familiar. She almost expected it. Laura had always been gifted at twisting truth into sympathy, a master at turning passive aggression into performance art. This time, though, she'd levelled up. She wasn't just rewriting history, she was publishing it. A few minutes later, the text started. "Aunt Melissa, just saw Laura's post. Are you okay, sweetheart? What happened?" Her cousin Danny, "Heard you had a breakdown. Please call me." Even her old college roommate messaged, "Hey, random I know, but I saw something weird on Facebook. Just checking in." Emily didn't reply. Not yet. She scrolled back to Laura's post, now with over 200 likes and 36 comments. She recognised some of the names, family friends, extended cousins, even one of her mother's church group members. The story was spreading fast and the narrative was clear. Emily had gone off the rails, had lost it, had ruined a beautiful family moment because she couldn't handle being included. It was brilliant in a cruel, calculated way, because it played to every assumption people already made about her. The difficult daughter, the quiet one, the black sheep. Now they'd paint her not just as the disappointment, but as unstable. And the worst part? It was working. She knew exactly how it would unfold. They'd call each other, embellish the tale a little more each time. By the end of the week, she'd be the villain in a story where they were just trying to bring the family together. Laura would get sympathy. Jacob would stay silent, letting the story grow in the vacuum. Their parents would sigh dramatically, telling everyone how heartbreaking it all was, how they tried so hard, and Emily, she'd be the crazy one who tore up legal papers and stormed out. She set her phone down on the hotel desk and walked to the window. Outside, the morning light had finally begun to stretch over the hills, casting long golden beams across the sky. It should have been beautiful, peaceful, but all she could feel was heat behind her eyes, not from sadness, from clarity. They were faster than her. She had underestimated that. For all her planning, she hadn't anticipated how quickly they'd rally the narrative, how seamlessly they'd weaponize her silence against her. They had done it before. She remembered being 15, getting a nosebleed after a screaming match with her father, and later overhearing her mum say, "She always has such emotional outbursts," as if she had been the one throwing things. She remembered when Jacob had borrowed money from her and never paid it back, only to later tell a mutual friend that she was always bitter about finances. She remembered when Laura told an ex-boyfriend that Emily liked to play victim any time someone disagreed with her. It had always been like this. Rewrite, reframe, retell, and she had let them. Not anymore. She picked up her phone again and opened the email thread from the Forbes editor. It was scheduled to go live at 9 a.m. sharp, just under 2 hours from now. The article would include her story, her voice, her truth, with scanned documents, time-stamped evidence, donation receipts and real names, redacted only where legally necessary. She wasn't going to beg for understanding. She was going to prove them wrong, not by fighting their lies, but by telling her truth, loud enough that no one could ignore it. At exactly 9 a.m, Emily tapped post. No caption, no explanation, just the link. Forb. Pubs.com. The founder who gave everything then walked away. It appeared on her Twitter timeline first, then LinkedIn, then her rarely used Facebook account. No flashy introduction, no dramatic quotes, just the article clean and centred. It was a controlled detonation, a precise, quiet eruption. And within minutes the world began to shift. The piece opened with her story, not the one her family had crafted, but the real one. It detailed how she had built a multi-million-dollar subscription platform from scratch, how she had stayed anonymous to protect her sanity, how she had used shell companies to send funds to family members who never knew it came from her. There were images of the documents she had prepared for the reunion, notarized letters gifting early retirement, proof of college fund transfers, settlement offers, job referral forms. The dates were clear. The signatures were visible. The folders matched the table setting from the night before. It was all there, undeniable, unfiltered, unapologetic, and it didn't take long for people to notice. Within the first hour, the article had over 50,000 reads. A few small accounts started sharing it. Tech Twitter, startup blogs, lifestyle writers. Then the bigger names picked it up. A venture capitalist reposted it with the comment, "This is what real strength looks like." A Women in Tech newsletter pushed it to their mailing list. A mental health advocate quoted it in a thread about generational trauma. And then came the tweet that changed everything. From @SheSaidUnfiltered, a verified account with over 3 million followers, known for her viral, razor-sharp takes on family, feminism and self-worth. She posted a screenshot of the Forbes headline and added, "She didn't leave the family, she left the abuse." That line caught fire. Within 20 minutes, it had been retweeted 10,000 times. A hashtag was born, #SheLeftTheAbuse. People flooded her inbox with messages of support, their own stories, their own scars. Victims of toxic families, of golden child dynamics, of manipulation masked as love. The comments rolled in faster than Emily could read them. Cried reading this. I've been the black sheep my whole life. I kept thinking maybe if I gave more, they'd love me. This article made me realise it was never about me. Not every parent deserves forgiveness. Not every sibling deserves access. Silent generosity is still generosity. You deserved better. By noon, the article had crossed 250,000 views. And for the first time in her life, Emily wasn't invisible. She wasn't misunderstood. She wasn't the punchline to someone else's joke. She was heard. Still, she said nothing. She didn't clap back at Laura's post. She didn't respond to Jacob's vague tweet claiming, "People will say anything for attention." She let the truth speak for itself. Because that's what it was now, a truth that lived outside her. One that couldn't be silenced or rewritten. One that had receipts, dates, and a public platform. She sat in the corner of a quiet cafe that afternoon, watching it all unfold on her screen. Across from her, no one knew who she was. No one whispered or pointed. The anonymity felt warm, earned. She sipped her coffee slowly, one eye on the screen as the ripple effects deepened. An online parenting forum picked up the story. A YouTube therapist broke it down in a reaction video. Podcasts started requesting interviews. But she didn't speak, she didn't need to, because the message had already landed, not just with strangers on the internet, but with the very people who thought they'd defined her. She knew they were reading it, she didn't need confirmation, but it came anyway. Laura deleted her original Facebook post by mid-afternoon. Jacob locked his Twitter account. Her mother changed her profile picture to something generic. No family photos, no smiling faces. The silence was almost louder than the noise. It meant they knew. It meant the truth hit home. And as the article continued to climb, shared by wellness influencers, tech founders, trauma counsellors, even quiet employees who had always seen her brilliance, Emily allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. Not pride, not vengeance, just stillness. For years they had controlled the story. They had shaped her identity with sarcasm, omission, and conditional affection. But now the story belonged to her. And it wasn't about revenge, it was about release. The backlash from Emily's Forbes article didn't hit her family all at once. It came in waves. The first ripple arrived with Ben's post. Within 12 hours of the article going viral, he tweeted a thinly veiled subtweet. Some people rewrite history for attention. We tried for years. Sometimes it's just never enough. It wasn't his first mistake. The replies were quick, merciless, and more informed than he expected. Someone replied with a screenshot of a GoFundMe Ben had created last year, one claiming financial hardship. A comment highlighted the donation from an anonymous user that matched the exact amount Emily had paid through her Shell account. Another dug up a 3-year-old Facebook post where Ben bragged about getting bailed out last minute by a silent investor. The irony was thick, especially when someone else replied with a meme. Imagine biting the hand that paid your rent. Then came Laura's turn. Desperate to salvage her image, she sent out a private email blast to family and a few shared contacts. In it, she included childhood photos, one of Emily with her head down at a birthday party, another where she looked isolated from the group. Laura's tone was soft, almost patronising. Just want people to understand the full context. We've always tried to love her through her struggles. Someone forwarded the email, and someone else leaked it. The internet responded quickly, dissecting Laura's narrative with surgical precision. They unearthed an old tweet from Laura during college that read, "Every family has that one sibling who's just off. We call ours the ghost." The replies to that tweet were brutal. "You mean the sister who paid your rent and your kids' tuition? This aged like spoiled milk. The ghost became a spotlight, congrats." People were angry, not just on Emily's behalf, but for everyone who had ever been dismissed, mislabelled or scapegoated by their own family. She had become a symbol, a stand-in for so many quiet siblings in the shadows of louder, more celebrated ones. Reddit threads dissected the Forbes article line by line. TikTok creators dramatised moments from the story with voiceovers and soft piano music. Therapists reacted live on YouTube, pointing out classic signs of narcissistic family dynamics. What started as a family feud had become a full-blown cultural moment. But it wasn't just the internet that took notice. Local news outlets picked up the story. One even contacted the family for comment. According to a leaked voicemail, their father declined, saying only, "We're going through a private family matter." But the damage was done. The wolves had been unmasked. People who once believed Laura and Ben's polished facades now looked at them differently. They weren't the victims anymore. They were the architects of emotional sabotage. Their public images, once curated with filtered vacation photos and inspirational quotes, were now juxtaposed against screenshots, receipts, and stories from former classmates, colleagues, and distant relatives. Emily didn't lift a finger. She didn't make a follow-up statement. She didn't post a selfie or write a thread or go live to cry. She stayed silent, because she didn't need to defend what was already self-evident. The truth, once exposed, doesn't need a narrator. It breathes on its own. And while the internet buzzed and her siblings flailed, Emily sat quietly in a co-working space she rented in the city. She opened her laptop, glanced at a growing folder labelled Phase 2, and smiled. She hadn't expected this level of exposure, but now that it was here, now that the curtain had been ripped away, she realised something powerful. She was free. They couldn't control the story anymore. And they couldn't control her, not with shame, not with silence, not with guilt masquerading as love. That part of her life was over, and what came next would be entirely hers. Just when the internet firestorm seemed to settle into a simmer, someone lit a new match. It started on a Reddit thread titled, "Breaking Down the Clark Family Timeline, Receipts Included." The user wasn't famous. Their handle was ordinary, forgettable even, at proof before pity. But what they posted wasn't. It was a meticulous timeline, month by month, sometimes week by week, detailing interactions, money transfers, and family events mentioned in the Forbes article. But it didn't stop there. Screenshots were attached. Redacted emails, Venmo receipts with vague emojis, Instagram comments that hinted at past dynamics. One image showed a banking transaction labelled CL Recovery Holdings LLC, applied to a mortgage balance. The same shell company name was mentioned briefly in the Forbes article. The Redditor had connected it to a transfer on Emily's birthday, a gift no one in her family had acknowledged publicly, but one that silently kept a roof over her parents' heads. Another screenshot showed a text exchange between Ben and a friend, where he bragged, "My sister covered it. She always does. She just doesn't talk about it." He had deleted the message later, but the recipient hadn't. Proof before Pity concluded the thread with a bold claim. This isn't just a case of family conflict. This is long-term emotional neglect, financial exploitation and reputational gaslighting. It gained traction fast. Then came the twist no one saw coming. A new Reddit comment appeared beneath the post. The username was blank at first, deleted, but the message read, "I used to work at the bank where the Clarks refinanced their home 3 years ago. The mortgage should have defaulted. It was suddenly covered in full by a third party. We were told to mark it anonymous, but we knew. It was her. We just couldn't say it out loud." Screenshots followed, partial account statements, memos marked internal only, a digital signature from E. Clark hidden under a proxy management firm. The thread exploded. Subreddits across the platform picked it up. Finance, legal, emotional abuse survivors, then Twitter, then TikTok. People created infographics mapping out the emotional manipulation through years of overlooked milestones and public denial. Emily wasn't just a sympathetic figure anymore. She was a movement. She left. The abuse trended again, this time accompanied by a new wave of content, side-by-side comparisons of Emily's generosity versus her family's public silence. A particularly viral post listed the following: Kate's kids' tuition, paid; Jacob's debt settlement, paid; parents' mortgage, paid; Emily's birthday acknowledgement from family, 0 posts; Emily's name mentioned in family photos, 0 times; Emily's emotional labour, never repaid. The conclusion read, "She didn't walk away, she escaped." It hit like thunder. Support poured in from unexpected places. A former teacher of Emily's shared a blog post about how she had been the quietest fighter he'd ever taught. A non-profit organisation for women in tech announced a scholarship in her name, funded within 24 hours by small donors and anonymous backers. Meanwhile, the Clark family began to feel the weight of exposure. Kate's photography business lost clients. Brands she worked with quietly distanced themselves. A planned workshop was cancelled due to unexpected scheduling conflicts. Ben's speaking engagement at a local leadership conference was pulled. The organiser released a vague statement about misalignment of values. Even Emily's parents weren't spared. Their names weren't publicised, but whispers spread through their community. Church members side-eyed them. Long-time neighbours stopped waving. Behind closed doors they were unravelling. And Emily? She didn't react publicly, not once. Her accounts remained untouched, her statements silent. But the silence spoke volumes. For the first time in her life, she wasn't explaining herself. She wasn't begging to be believed. She had offered proof. The world had listened. And now the people who once controlled her story were discovering what it felt like to be voiceless, to be exposed, to be truly, undeniably seen, not as the protagonists they'd imagined, but as the architects of pain. And as the chaos rippled outward, Emily sat quietly in a park, with her laptop on her knees, reading the same thread the world was dissecting. At the bottom of the post, one comment stood out. When the truth comes with evidence, the lies collapse under their own weight. She smiled, not because she won, but because they finally lost their grip. The fallout didn't just come in headlines or hashtags. It came in silences. Laura's marriage unravelled quietly. At first it was subtle. Her husband removing tagged photos, cancelling joint events, no longer appearing in her stories. Then one day, a vague post appeared on her Instagram. Sometimes loving yourself means leaving what damages your peace. The next week, divorce papers were filed. Friends speculated, but insiders knew. Her husband had seen the messages, the screenshots, the mounting public backlash. He didn't want the scandal touching their children. He didn't want to be complicit by association. And he definitely didn't want to be in the same frame as someone now labelled a textbook emotional manipulator. Ben's fall was quicker. His scheduled keynote speech at a local entrepreneurial summit was pulled without public explanation. But attendees shared what they'd heard behind the scenes, that sponsors felt uncomfortable endorsing a figure who was now publicly linked to manipulation, entitlement and hypocrisy. His personal brand, once built on charm and relatability, was now radioactive. He posted a vague story. People love tearing others down once you're visible. I'll rise again. Watch me. No one was watching, and their parents. They tried to hold out, tried to weather the storm as though nothing had changed, but the truth clung to them like smoke. At the bank, their refinancing application was denied, not because of scandal, but because the anonymous monthly deposits that had once padded their finances had stopped. Their miracle savings had vanished. Emily had turned off the tap, and the silence echoed. For decades she had been their safety net, their unspoken plan B, and now without her, there was only gravity. Meanwhile, Emily was thousands of miles away, physically and mentally. She had booked a one-way ticket to Lisbon on a whim. She didn't post about it. No check-ins, no airport selfies, just a single line in her private journal. I want to wake up somewhere where no one expects anything of me. In Portugal, she found breath again. She walked narrow stone streets with no destination. She sipped coffee at street cafes and read entire novels in one sitting. She picked up her pen and began writing, not code, not strategy memos, but chapters, real ones. Her memoir took shape slowly, not as revenge, but as reclamation. She wrote about her childhood, her silence, her survival. She changed the names, but not the truths. And for the first time, she didn't worry about how they'd feel reading it. She wasn't curating her pain to protect anyone anymore. Between pages, she mentored young founders, women mostly, many from backgrounds like hers, dismissed, overlooked, labelled difficult for wanting better. She didn't tell them what to do. She simply listened, gave space, validated their fire. She became the mentor she never had. One morning, while watching the sunrise from her rented apartment's balcony, Emily received an email from a young woman she had once mentored anonymously through a startup accelerator. The subject line read, "You saved me." The message was short. "I left a toxic home because of you. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm somewhere safe. That's enough for now. Thank you for showing me it's possible." Emily read it twice, then once more, and she cried, not because she was sad, but because something inside her finally exhaled. This was what healing looked like, not applause, not vindication, but peace, the kind that came quietly, the kind that didn't need to be earned, the kind that arrived once you stopped proving and started living. She no longer tracked her family's posts. People still sent her screenshots, updates, whispers, but she deleted them before finishing the first line. They weren't her responsibility anymore. They never really were. And as she watched the city below stir to life, vendors setting up, bikes gliding down cobblestone hills, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in decades: lightness. Not because everything was perfect, but because she was finally free from pretending it ever had to be. Emily sat on a weathered bench facing the river, a thin breeze rustling through the trees overhead. Her journal was open on her lap, pen idle in her fingers. The city hummed quietly around her, bike bells in the distance, the occasional clink of coffee cups from a nearby cafe patio. Lisbon moved at its own pace, and for once, so did she. Her phone buzzed. She almost didn't check it. Most messages these days were from readers, mentees, or journalists, sometimes updates about book drafts. Occasionally a tag from a stranger thanking her for standing up, but something about this one was different. The name wasn't familiar. No profile picture, just a message preview that read, "Because of you, I finally left." She tapped it open. "Hi, you don't know me. I read your story a month ago. I was scared. I always thought maybe my family would change, maybe if I just worked harder they'd love me. But they didn't. And when I read about what you did, how you walked away, how you stayed silent but strong, I realised I wasn't alone. Last week I packed my things. I left the city. I'm crashing with a friend right now, still figuring it out. But for the first time, I'm not afraid. I just wanted you to know. You saved me." Emily didn't move for a long time. Her hands trembled slightly, not with panic, but with something deeper. Recognition. Resonance. She hadn't written her story to become a symbol. She had written it to breathe, to reclaim, to let go. But knowing that her pain had helped someone else escape their own, that was something she hadn't prepared for. Tears slipped down her cheeks, quiet, unforced, the kind that came when the weight of everything finally loosened. She wasn't crying from sadness. She was crying because she finally believed it. She was free. Not just geographically, not just professionally, but emotionally. She had walked through fire, and now she could feel the wind on her skin. She wrote back a single line. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you it was possible." Then she turned her phone face down and let herself cry a little longer. Later that night, curled up in her apartment's armchair with a cup of tea, Emily allowed herself a dangerous question. Do they miss me? Not the real her, of course, but their version, their scapegoat, their financial safety net, their silent absorber of blame. Because as much as she wanted to believe the chapter was closed, pieces of her still wondered. Had they reflected, regretted, apologised? And that's when she remembered. Not one of them ever truly had. Oh, they had reached out, in their own ways. Ben had sent a single text. You really had to make it public? Wow. Kate had messaged something about we all process pain differently, followed by a sad face emoji. Their mother had emailed a vague letter, all platitudes. We love you no matter what. Let's move forward. But nowhere was there a real apology. No acknowledgement of what they'd done. No naming of the moments that cracked her. No sitting in the discomfort of what they allowed, encouraged, excused. They hadn't mourned her absence. They'd mourned the loss of access to her money, to her patience, to the version of her that stayed quiet no matter how deep the cut. They hadn't missed her. They missed the wallet with a heart. That realisation didn't make her bitter. It made her still. There was no rage left, only release. She closed her eyes, letting the soft notes of fado music drift in from a distant window, the kind of melancholy that didn't ache but honoured the ache that used to be. This was her echo. Not the absence her family left behind, but the space she reclaimed by stepping out of their shadow. She didn't need their apologies anymore. She didn't even need their guilt. She had everything she needed already, peace, truth, and the freedom to choose herself every day from now on. The late spring sun cast a golden haze over the vineyard as guests gathered under a white canopy, the scent of wildflowers and fresh bread floating through the air. Emily stood quietly near the edge of the celebration, a glass of sparkling water in hand, watching her best friend say, "I do," with a wide, teary smile. It had been 2 years since the night she walked out of that lake house. 2 years since the T-shirt. 2 years since she stopped apologising for existing. And now she was here. Not as someone hiding, not as someone healing, but simply present. Her dress was simple but elegant, a soft blue that moved gently in the breeze. She wore no makeup beyond tinted lip balm, no armour. She didn't need any. The ceremony ended with laughter and applause, guests rising to their feet as the newlyweds kissed and walked down the aisle. Music rose behind them, a low and joyful swell. Conversations bubbled up as people moved towards the reception tent. Emily made her way slowly towards the bar, half smiling at familiar faces and strangers alike. She didn't know most of them, but she was comfortable in that anonymity. Being unknown was no longer a wound, it was a gift. "Excuse me," a voice said beside her. "Are you—" She turned to find a young woman, maybe late 20s, holding a champagne flute and a look of cautious recognition. Emily offered a polite nod. "Am I what?" The woman hesitated, then smiled. "The T-shirt woman from the Forbes article 2 years ago. You're her, aren't you?" Emily let the question hang in the air for a moment, then gave the softest of smiles. "Yes," she said, "I'm her." There was no sting in the words, no shame, no bitterness, only truth. The woman's eyes lit up. "I thought so. I recognised you the second I saw your face. Your story, it changed me. I sent it to my sister. We both cried. You made us feel seen." Emily felt the warmth bloom in her chest. Not overwhelming, not dramatic, just a gentle glow. "Thank you," she said, sincerely. "I'm glad it meant something to you." They talked briefly about life, about travel, about healing. Then the woman returned to her table, and Emily was left once again with her thoughts, her glass, and the faint sound of wind catching the edges of the reception tent. She looked out across the vineyard, the rows of green stretching into the hills. A few children ran past her, chasing bubbles. The bride and groom danced beneath fairy lights, and somewhere in the background a string quartet began to play something slow and familiar. It was, in every way, an ordinary day, and that, more than anything, was extraordinary, because there was a time, not long ago, when Emily would have attended this event wondering what her family would think, whether she looked too serious, whether someone might find her cold, whether her success would make others uncomfortable. But not today. Today she was just herself, and that was more than enough. A part of her still carried the weight of the past, the silence, the betrayals, the roles she had been cast in without consent. But those parts no longer defined her. They were chapters, not the whole book. She had written new pages since then, pages filled with freedom, friendship, choice, and forgiveness. Not for them, for herself. She had forgiven the girl who kept showing up, hoping for approval that never came. The woman who gave and gave, believing love would follow. The version of her who stayed far too long at a table where no one saved her a seat. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't grieving anymore. She was simply living. As the first notes of the evening's dance song echoed through the vineyard, someone offered her a hand to join. She hesitated only a second before taking it, and as she stepped onto the dance floor, laughter rising all around her, Emily Clark danced like a woman who had nothing left to prove, because she didn't. Not to them, not to the world, not even to herself. That night, back in her apartment overlooking the river, Emily sat cross-legged on the floor beside a locked metal box. It was matte black, heavy and unadorned, just like she wanted. She hadn't opened it in over a year. For a long time it had felt too loaded, too heavy with ghosts, intentions, and the kind of love that came with wounds attached. But tonight, after the wedding, after the dance, after saying, "Yes, I'm her," without a flinch, something in her shifted. She entered the passcode. Click. The lid opened slowly, revealing a stack of cream-coloured documents preserved with care in plastic sleeves. Each one was familiar, though she hadn't touched them since before the night everything changed. The college tuition fund, the mortgage release, the debt forgiveness letter, the job offer, the handwritten note she never delivered. I hope this brings peace to all of us. She ran her fingers over the edges. They had all called her dramatic, sensitive, overreactive, and yet not one of them had ever asked why she'd done it all in the first place. It wasn't to prove a point. It wasn't even for redemption. It was love. Flawed, desperate, aching love. She had wanted so badly to be accepted that she built lifeboats for people who barely saw her drowning. She had been the net beneath their chaos, the scaffolding behind their glossy lives, and in return they gave her a T-shirt. Biggest disappointment. But the truth, the twist she had never spoken aloud, she still loved them, not with the same reckless devotion, not with hope, but with the quiet mourning of someone who once believed, and this box, these papers were proof, not of generosity, not of wealth, but of intention, of how hard she tried, of who she had once been. Emily carefully resealed each document, slid them back into their folder and placed the folder into a new fireproof sleeve. Then gently she closed the lid and locked the box again. She didn't keep it for them. She kept it for herself, as a reminder, not of pain, but of truth. She had loved them, fully, fiercely, even when they didn't deserve it. And now, she didn't hate them. She just didn't want them in her life. That distinction mattered. Forgiveness, people often said, was about setting yourself free, but forgiveness wasn't a key that unlocked reconciliation. It didn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it meant walking away with no intention of ever returning, but doing so without rage burning in your chest. She didn't need apologies anymore. She didn't even want them. What could they say that would change anything? What words could undo years of silence, snide remarks and purposeful erasure? They missed her, perhaps, but not as she truly was. They missed the obedient version, the quiet one, the giver. They missed the woman who folded into corners and let them speak over her. That woman no longer existed. Emily stood, carried the locked box to her bookshelf and tucked it behind a row of first edition novels. It would remain there, untouched, unspoken, but never forgotten. Because every story needs an ending, and this was hers, clean, quiet, final. She turned off the lights and stepped onto her balcony. The river below shimmered with city light, soft ripples reflecting her calm. She closed her eyes, breathing in the warm breeze, and felt no sadness, just certainty. For years she had twisted herself into versions they might love. Now she lived only as herself, and if that meant some doors stayed closed forever, so be it. She had built her own house, and no one would ever get a key again.